Hello, sir.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon now, I guess.
Yeah.
Our
So,
pre-conversations always
yeah,
take up a good chunk of our time, which is good.
well, we
Um,
have a lot to catch up on.
oh yeah, because I've been spending the last couple of weeks trying to be quiet.
Very
Um,
good. So we are on we're reading the Masters in the Path of Occultism by Gottfried de Purucker, and we're on chapter 7 out of 8, and we'll finish this book here in the next couple of days. But you're gonna read today, yeah?
you have me for this installment of it.
All right, fantastic.
So yes, The Masters in the Path of Occultism, Chapter 7, The Mystery Schools and Initiation. So the mysteries were originally the secret schools founded by the great seers and sages of the human race. The national sages and seers, one or more in each country, founded each his own school in which he taught not merely esoteric law and discipline and many of the arts and sciences, but also taught men how to live and how to receive the visions sublime. There we go. That was the origin of the mysteries, and the teachings of Theosophy today are the doctrines expressed in modern formulation of the tenets then taught and lived. The fundamental teachings of all these mystery schools all over the world were the same. That great doctrine, which we call the wisdom religion of antiquity, today called Theosophy. These mysteries, even in their original form, which form was indeed kept to the very end of their existence, were taught in two ways: by dramatic expression or symbolism in the form of ritual and ceremony of certain natural secrets, and by mouth to ear communication of holy truths. Both the small and the great mysteries of antiquity, as they were about the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, had preserved, even to that day, more or less all of the inferior part of the teachings given in dramatic form, and somewhat of the same idea of ritualism and ceremonial observances still prevails in Occidental countries in certain secret and fraternal organizations. But at the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, that is to say, at the time when Christianity began to extend widely, the deeper teachings, the mouth to ear communication of high truths, were withdrawn. As to the form that the 10 days celebration of the greater mysteries took each year, I might make a brief picture of them in words without going too far, because I tell you frankly that the same mysteries are celebrated today in their fullness in proper quarters, and with all the ancient possibilities of achievement in initiation. And among us Theosophists today, there are those who know of this for a fact. I will give you a picture in the form of dramatic symbology. The seed must die before the offspring, which is of itself comes into being, and the raising of the new out of the old is symbolic of the birth of the inner God in the neophyte. You may read in some of the rather mystical treatises of the Christian literary cycle of the Christ Son, of the Son Christ. This is an allusion not to the man Jesus, but to the Christ light in the core of every human being. When the Christ in the heart of a man is enabled to express himself fully through the outer man, then the spiritual sun god is born. Then, indeed, in the mystical wording of the early Christians, can the witnesses of this sublime rite chant, "All hail to the risen Christ," out of the gloom of matter and the bondage of the lower selfhood. These beautiful symbolical things are facts in initiation. They contain wondrous truths of life. They contain wondrous truths of science in the modern understanding of that word as classified knowledge, as well as truths of religion and of philosophy. One of the greatest of the esoteric schools among the Greeks and later among the Romans was that of the Mithraists. They had a wonderful teaching, which was also a mystery teaching. Mithraism drove Christianity so hard at one time, and the scales were so evenly balanced that a feather's weight in the Mithraic scale would have changed the course of history. Christianity prevailed only because it was easier of acceptance on belief by the unthinking multitude. The nations surrounding the Mediterranean Sea at that time were, spiritually speaking, running on a downgrade. An era of spiritual and intellectual obscuration had come upon men, and the grand old teachings of the mystery schools had been largely forgotten, and the races that then lived around the Mediterranean could hardly understand those teachings. The time finally came when they preferred to believe on faith rather than to think. That is why Christianity prevailed. Mithraism at one time was predominant in court, in the army, in the navy, among the people, indeed everywhere. But it required study, thinking, something more than easy belief. And speaking in a strange paradox, it was its greatness which was its weakness. It was too great for a degenerate people to understand it. Consider the Eleusinian as another type of esoteric society, commonly called the mysteries of Eleusis. Consider also the mysteries of Samothrace. Concerning these, the greatest men of Greece and Rome have told us that in them a man was taught how grandly to live, and when his time comes, how grandly to die, filled with a fervent hope that he was on his way to join the gods, not in body, but in essence, preceding a return here on earth among men. But why, one may ask, are these ancient mystery centers now but a memory? How did they fall? Why did they die? How was it that they passed? For the same reasons that all human institutions finally fall and die. Those in charge prove faithless to the trust. Nothing on this earth could have overthrown these schools had they remained true at heart, for the might of the great masters would then have been behind them. And this might means the spiritual solar fire. At Eleusis, for instance, things had come to such a pass that the initiations and the teachings became a mere rite or a mere ceremonial, a mere form, like the Christian ceremonies today of baptism and the communion, and whatnot. The school at Athens, which was the same as the Eleusinian, was closed by an imperial rescript of the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, and seven philosophers, sincere, earnest, and good men, and the only faithful ones of the time, fled their native land, Greece, fled to King Khosrou of Persia for protection against the laws and armies and tyranny of persecutions of imperial Rome. The Persian king received them hospitably, and as Rome at the time was at war with Persia, when Persia won in this war, one of the conditions of the peace was, and it was laid down with the sword, that these 7 philosophers should be permitted to return to their native land, and to live in peace, and to teach in peace, and to die in peace, and so it was. Ephesus was another center where the sacred teachings at one time were taught in fame. Babylon also, and Memphis in Egypt, and there were scores of other such places on the globe, all teaching the same fundamental system of truths. They taught occultism, the secret teaching of the things that are hid, not apparent, secret, such as the structure of the universe around us, the kind and nature and quality and circumstances of the spiritual beings who fill the universe full, and man's origin and destiny, spiritual, psychical, physical. The pathways of initiation. Now there are 2 ways for a man to achieve his destiny, 2 ways for a human soul to reach its own inner powers, the full expansion of its own godlike genius. The first is that followed by the majority, drifting along like flotsam on the ceaselessly moving ebb and flow of the ocean of time. And this is the path of natural evolution, of natural growth. But oh, how slow, how slow, how slow it is. Ages will pass before the expansion of inner faculties and powers reaches even a modicum of a larger greatness. The other pathway is initiation. This means a quicker growth, a more rapid evolution, a more speedy emergence from the chrysalis of humanhood into possessing the wings of the spirit, into becoming the bird of eternity. To change the metaphor somewhat, This is a path, as H.P. Blavatsky, the main founder of the Theosophical Society, so nobly wrote, rugged and uphill though it be for the average man, yet it leads to the very heart of the universe. The one traveling this path passes through the portals of growth quickly, relatively speaking, so that instead of spending ages and slowly evolving, he can grip himself, guide his own evolution, and thus much more quickly grow. This is self-directed evolution. This is initiation. It exists today, but there are preparations necessary, especially for initiation. None can follow a pathway. Is it not obvious? Which he has not the strength to walk upon. Therefore, he must gather strength unto himself. He must prepare himself. To use the language of the Christian New Testament, he must gird up his loins and take his staff in his hand, have no thought for the morrow, and carry nothing with him. Light-footed must he speed along, without encumbering and hampering weights. How do you make these preparations? Become self-forgetful. For then you throw off your burdens. You hate not, and you love all things, both small and great. Forget yourself, and you are forget yourself, and you are then no longer enchained with the bonds of desire and acquisition, tying you to things of evanescent and impermanent value. Your soul, your spirit, your mind, your heart become infilled with impersonally great and noble thoughts, desires, and aspirations, which even one thought of merely personal profit and personal acquisition and gain will kill, at least for the time being. Initiation is a means of stimulating evolution, and there are many kinds of initiation. Some are very difficult indeed, such as only the greatest and strongest men can take, for the road is thorny and beset with pitfalls simply because we human beings are weak. We are growing, we are not yet fully developed, but there are other initiations which are much easier, and which, while they do not indeed produce the great fruits in the increase of consciousness and the gaining of comprehension that the great initiations do, nevertheless they are very helpful. Man, know thyself, for thyself is a divine being rooted in the universe of which the human being is an extension, so to speak. Therefore, by looking within, by following the roots of your own inner spiritual being ever more inwards and upwards, you come to understand naturally the mysteries of Mother Nature. It is a great and wonderful adventure. Every man is capable of developing this inner consciousness in his heart, and therefore you can do it. You can gain wonderfully just by cultivating a few simple rules of mental and practical conduct. Be kindly, refuse to hate, learn to love, learn to forgive, let your heart expand, be yourself, and expand your sympathies. Touch with the tendrils of your consciousness the hearts of other human beings. Oh, what a delight to feel, as it were, the inner spiritual electrical quiver that your own soul experiences when you have touched the heart of a fellow human being. Practicing these rules of morals and of noble ethics, you begin a shortcut to a comprehension of yourself, and ultimately you touch the mysteries of the universe. A great mystery is a human being. There is infinity in his heart of hearts. Man is a child of eternity, and eternity is in the very structure of the consciousness of his being. Man is an incarnate God, albeit a fallen God, misusing his powers. Nevertheless, by that fact, he can rise again and will rise again. And every normal human being must know, if he studies himself, that in his consciousness there is a beaming light, a star of glory, and that he can follow this light to the ever greater expansions of splendor, for the entire universe is his playground, is the stage of his adventure, which is cosmic life. And as a pilgrim passing from the eternity of the past into the eternity of the future, he plays many parts on the stage of life. Out of eternity have we come, journeying through realm after realm of nature's mystic and invisible constitution, through worlds both invisible and visible, gathering experience in each, perfecting our faculties in each. And when grown great in any such world, or on any such plane, or in any such sphere, having learned all the lessons that these worlds and planes and spheres can give us, then we pass to still nobler things. The two paths. When a human being has learned all that earth can teach him, he is then godlike and returns to earth no more, except those whose hearts are so filled with the holy flame of compassion that they remain in the schoolroom of earth that they have long since advanced beyond, and where they themselves can learn nothing more in order to help their younger, less evolved brothers. These exceptions we Theosophists call the Buddhas of compassion, the Christs, and such a spirit is the Christ spirit. Either path is noble, to pass onward into nirvana, or to return to earth to help mankind. Both lead to heights of spiritual sublimity, but one, the road of compassion, is divine. Someday all must make that choice. But the results of making that choice, of choosing the road of self-forgetfulness and pity and impersonal love for all others, while temporarily holding you in the realms of illusion, of matter, will ultimately lead you by a road straighter than any other, to the core of the universal heart. For you shall have obeyed the impersonal commands of cosmic love, and that means allying yourselves consciously with divinity. The object of initiation. There is such a thing as to training the faculties and energies of the human understanding, of the human mind, of the human heart, that these become enormously receptive of natural truth. This procedure in ancient days was called initiation into the mysteries. Specially trained men, great initiates of the ages, trained by others who had been previously trained and prepared, sent their spirit into and behind the veil of exterior matter deep into the abysses of the cosmic heart, and consciously brought back what they had there seen. Initiation is not but a becoming at one with your own inner God, your own spiritual being, and this means expanding your consciousness, your inner powers, so that they take cosmic extent. Being at one with the spiritual essence of things, you live and breathe its atmosphere. You live and breathe its atmosphere and become a very God in flesh. Just as Jesus, the Syrian sage, said, I and my Father are one, referring here to his own inner God. When you become at one with your own inner God, in other words, become at one with the divine essence working through you and giving you intelligence and love and power and vision, you have allied yourself with the divinity within, and thus become a god among men, literally. The great ones of the past have done just this. The lesser men do it in degree. And these lesser sons of men are they whom we call geniuses. In past ages, when the currents of material life ran less strongly than today, when men's minds were turned more to the things which endure it, it was thought to be man's loftiest objective to become more than man, more than an ordinary human. In order to do this, a man whose heart was hungered for truth and whose soul was quickened with an intuition of great spiritual values entered upon the path of the ancient mystery teaching. He gave up his life in order to find life. He broke the bonds of personal existence, limited, restricted, constricted, so that his soul might expand into its native cosmic essence. That is what the mysteries of the ancient days in their higher degrees did for the men who were capable and strong enough to undertake the tests and pass them successfully. Now the study and investigation of the secret laws of our great parent, Mother Nature, of which we are all children, is called occultism. It also involves the highest form of spiritual self-dedication. An end of this study and investigation cannot be reached because Mother Nature herself and her wondrous and illimitable fields of existence is endless. So this means that behind every veil which now confronts and blinds you, you can pass into a greater light, only to find another veil beyond, behind which, by greater growth still, you may go. And so on forever. What a sublime hope! Endless growth, endless expansion, undying vision. It is a blessed thought that we gain it all by our own efforts alone. Brotherhood is based on nature's fundamental law. that no entity lives unto itself absolutely. It cannot. In trying to violate this fundamental law, it perishes in time. But when we live unto others than our own self, we expand constantly. Our consciousness reaches forever and forevermore outwards to greater spaces, and finds its play in ever wider and grander fields. Living unto others is the way to grow great. This is not vapid sentimentality, it enunciates the first law of occult being. All the mystery schools of the past, all the methods of initiations, were founded with one object in view: to bring forth from within the spiritual powers of those who were prepared, the faculties divine of the God within. These initiations are not alone of the past. Let me tell you in all solemnity of holy truth that they continue today for those who are found worthy and ready and prepared. Excuse me. All initiations so far as pictorial rite or figurative symbolism went portrayed the mystic structure and operations and secrets of the hid universe as expressed in the acts and words of the master initiator and of the neophyte. The great pyramid of Cheops was a majestic fane, a majestic temple wherein those who had been duly prepared to receive a vast and sublime light received it under wise guidance. And yet it was a tomb, but not of a dead body. It was a tomb of human personality where the lower, passionate, weak, vacillating, unsteady-minded man became for the time being at least an embodied God. By the ancient magic of the mystery schools of the archaic ages, at the times of the higher initiations, the God came forth from within the spiritual nature and shone directly through the physical vehicle, so that the body of the neophyte, as it lay in trance, was resplendent with light. And on the third day, when the neophyte was raised, remaining conscious of his sublimer experiences in the inner worlds for a short or a longer period, depending upon his own spiritual power, he taught even his teachers what he had learned behind the veil. And while he was in this state, his very face shone with glory, the glory of Father Son. This entire story of Jesus is given in the Christian New Testament as an esoteric or mystical tale setting forth in mystical form what took place in the initiation chambers. Initiation signifying the dying of the lower man, so that the higher nature of the neophyte could thereafter be released, and further that the postulant, when he had finished his 3 days initiation trial, might go forth anointed, or as one had received the unction or anointing in the mysteries. I would that I might describe this fully. Let me, however, say this: the neophyte lay entranced for 3 or more days and nights, and during that period of time his inner being was released from the chains of the body and went on its peregrinations through the entire solar system. From planet to planet and from planet to sun, finally passing the very portals of Father Son. Remember that according to the ancient wisdom, the heart of the Son is a cosmic divinity, the source of the glorious splendor and vitality which it is constantly pouring forth. On the eve of the 3rd day, the spirit soul began to wing its way back to its personal encasement. And on the morning of the 4th day, more or less as regards the time, the neophyte arose from the cruciform couch or bed on which he had lain attached, roped to it but for safety's sake only, and arose a master of light, a master of life, a Christ, a Buddha, one who had received the holy and mystical unction, the anointing on the forehead. Thereafter, he was a qualified and authorized spiritual teacher of men. He taught by the authority that belonged to him by natural right and by initiation, and he could say, as every such sage and seer has always said, I am the way, I am the life, I am the light. Everyone who has gone through these same wonderful experiences has said the same, and has truly spoken. Each one of us, if we attain in the same way, will find that it will be not merely our right, but our duty to teach, and that we shall teach with authority because we shall know. All the inner and higher part of our being will be awakened. Intuition, wisdom, and knowledge, instant, quick, certain, sure, and full, will infill our mind with the mysteries of the universe. We shall see grandly, and hence this is called the vision sublime. So we've got chapter 8 here. You want me to keep reading?
Man, that was
Talk about.
Just very quickly, that was an interesting chapter. I had just read The Voice of the Silence, and they have a section called The Two Paths in that as well. So they would go well together for anybody who is listening to this. I would definitely check that section out and see what HPB wrote about the two paths as well.
There's a lot of reference to the two paths and the DK writings too.
Yeah, and I, in a strange way, very quickly, I'll say, you see the two paths being the one path who's pushing forward and pushing ahead in evolution, and the other path that is just kind of staying behind and just taking it as it comes.
Mm-hmm.
And this reflection can be seen in politics, right? By the two by Republicans and Democrats, that is and I've read that is the higher version is, those who want to progress faster and those who want to just take their time. And there's always that back and forth and give and take.
Mm-hmm.
That comes with that. But anyway, yeah, man, it'd be great if you want to. I don't think if you want to do this, I don't think it's.
No, I think we can read on, but before we do that, this just kind of brings me back to what you and I were discussing before we came on camera too, and how the this kind of alluded to what we just read. This path of initiation essentially is to bring the Christ out in each of us, right? Get us to that Buddhic level, so to speak. And we're essentially establishing the kingdom of God, I guess, in a sense, by doing that, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree? And it actually reminded me of a passage that I read from the DK materials. I think it was the externalization of the hierarchy. I found it here. Your spiritual goal is the establishing of the kingdom of God. One of the first steps towards this is to prepare men's minds to accept the fact that the reappearance of Christ is imminent. You must tell men everywhere that the masters and their groups of disciples are actively working to bring order out of chaos. You must tell them that there is a plan, that there is nothing, and that nothing can possibly arrest the working out of that plan. You must tell them that the hierarchy stands, that it stands for thousands of years, and is the expression of the accumulated wisdom of the ages. You must tell them, above all else, that God is love, the hierarchy is love, and that Christ is coming because he loves humanity. This is the message which you must give at this time. And with this responsibility, I leave you. Go work, my brothers. So I thought that was an interesting tie into that, because there's a lot of cross references in all these materials we've been reading. But yeah, this is something that everybody can attain. And we just read that it's an individual thing. You can do it individually. So anyway,
the chaos being with the masters of the teaching of the masters of the Far East is chaos is known by by our own thoughts, by what we think chaos to be, but what they call it in the occult or the esoteric is the unmanifest. So it's all that's unmanifest. And then we bring forth from the unmanifest, right? And this is where once we get higher in the initiation process, you can bring forth from the unmanifest what is needed And this is where manifesting bread and came from, bringing it forth out of chaos or unmanifest. So anyway, yeah, it's just interesting stuff that all this kind of it all works together, no doubt.
All right. So is this the last chapter of the book here?
I believe it is. Yes, sir.
8 says the sacred seasons. The mysteries of antiquity were celebrated at various times of the year, in the spring, in the summertime, in the autumn, and at the winter solstice. These most sacred of the ancient mysteries began with the winter solstice. Therein were initiated certain men who had been chosen on account of having perfected a certain preliminary period of training. Chosen not arbitrarily, but because these elect were ready for the tests, to go through initiatory trials for the purpose of bringing out into manifestation in the man the divine faculties and powers of the inner God. The initiatory cycle contained the circling year as a symbol of the entire spiritual, intellectual, and psychical life cycle of a human being. And at the 4 cross periods, composing the cross of the universe, as the divine philosopher Plato called it, there took place the 4 great initiation ceremonies of human existence. The first of these initiations was called the birth. It took place and takes place at the time of the winter solstice, December 21st, 22nd, or thereabouts, which Christians now call the Christmas festival of December 25. And when this new birth occurred, then men said, "Lo, the Christ in man is born," or the inner Buddha is born from within the shell of the neophyte. As the man lived on, if he had the strength of will and the courage to proceed and to follow the path to the second initiatory stage, no matter how many years this may have taken or now may take, then came the Easter of his life, the second great initiation, when the Christ within him was not born, because that had already taken place, but when the Christ arose and took his own stand as a fully developed master, teacher, guide, and leader of men. Then came the third stage, that which was commemorated mythologically by so many of the ancient peoples in the festivals of the midsummer, of the summer solstice. On June 21 to 22nd began the trials of this third stage, and they lasted for 14 days, beginning at a time when the moon was new and culminating, and ending for that period when the moon was full. So it was also at the winter solstice, or Christmas initiation, beginning on December 21 to 22, when the moon was new, and ending 14 days afterwards, when the moon was full. Excuse me. So was it also during the springtime, the spring equinox, the second stage, and so was it again during the autumn period of September 21st to 22nd. Each of these initiation ceremonies began when, according to the ancient, wonderful, mystical, true astrology, the sun and moon and planets were rightly situated. Every one of these initiation periods began either at the time of the winter solstice, or of the spring equinox, or of the summer solstice, or of the autumnal equinox, respectively, therefore, on December 21 through 22, and lasted for 14 days until the full moon, or on March 21 through 22, and the lasting for 14 days until the full moon. Then on June 21 through 22, and lasting for 14 days until full moon, and then finally on September 21 through 22, and lasting for 14 days until the moon was full. This whole matter has been so completely lost. This whole matter has been so completely lost sight out of by Occidental peoples that it is most difficult adequately to describe the true circumstances. And the difficulty is rendered still greater by the fact that, due to misunderstanding and ignorance and ecclesiastical bigotry and jealousy, what remained or was taken over by the early Christians has been greatly distorted and changed. So that while actually the Christians celebrated 2 of these great initiation festivals, the ones they call Christmas and Easter, they know nothing of the other 2. and even the two that they still commemorate, they commemorate on approximately the accurate dates, but actually inaccurately because not following the exact astronomical time periods. The circle of the year represented symbolically the entire initiatory cycle that a man could follow from the beginning of his training until its end. There was the birth, then the resurrection, or rather the evocation of the inner Christ or Master, which was the mystic youth, just as the former had been the mystic birth. Then the third was the mystic majority or adulthood, at which the glorious initiate or master of life began an active, indeed a strenuous, career among men as teacher and guide and savior. And then finally, the last period, that of the passage into the great peace, where if such was the choice made and followed, the master left the world of men for ages and entered into other spheres. Many renounced this fourth and supreme initiation in order to remain Buddha-like, and their love and pity for erring mankind with men in order to help them and protect them and to guide them. The esoteric Easter. In the story of Jesus, I have briefly explained the trials of the neophyte at the winter solstice, when his spirit soul through initiation is born. Let us turn now to the spring equinox, for from the above, it must be evident that the Easter festival has behind it as its background an origin in esoteric fact. It represents an actual event which occurs annually in the spiritual life of man, because the events of a man's spiritual life faithfully reflect the events that take place in the spiritual life of the world. Every great mystical event on the ancient religions and philosophies of the world was commemorated in a feast, in the ancient sense of this word, in a festival such as Easter in Occidental lands now is, and such as was the European original and forerunner of the present-day Easter festival. The Ostara, or Istra, as it was called by different families of the early Germanic inhabitants of the northern European countries. In those lands, it took the form of a celebration of the vital forces working in the springtime, when new life is surging through the earth and affecting all Earth's children, when the trees begin to burgeon and the flowers begin to blow, and when a new hope is singing in men's hearts, representing in men, because derived from the spiritual realms, exactly what appears in the beauteous flowers that in those northern lands nature then begins to bring forth. How is the date of Easter reckoned today according to the Christian fashion of doing so? It is figured in this way. Easter falls on the first Sunday following the first full moon on the date of, or first after, the spring equinox. Bitter disputes arose in early days of Christianity about the proper date on which to celebrate the Christian Easter festival, commemorating the supposed resurrection, the rising of their Savior. And the greatest and most bitterly debated of these disputes was called the Quartodeciman, the word quartodeciman being taken from the Latin word for 14th, 14thers, and was so called because a large body of early Christians contended that Easter should fall on the 14th day, which was full moon day of the Jewish month of Aviv or Nisan, the same day on which the ancient Jews commemorated their Passover. The Jewish calendar was wholly a lunar one. Their months went by moons. As a matter of fact, even in English, the word month, derived from the Anglo-Saxon monthan, means the period of one lunation or one moon in Anglo-Saxon mona. But the Christians, the majority of them, did not like the idea of celebrating the resurrection of their Savior, Jesus Christ, although he was a Jew, on the same date on which the Jews commemorated their Passover. They were very largely of opinion that their Easter festival commemorating the alleged rising of Jesus must be celebrated on a Sunday, the day of the sun. Thus it came about that after a great deal of verbal fighting and verbal squabbling, very bitter and unkind some of it, the arguments of the Quattrodecimans were rejected, and they were declared to hold heretical opinions. This event took place on the Council of Nicaea in the year 325 of the Christian era. This decree of the Nicene Council showed that the Christians of that time had already lost the root meaning of the Easter festival. And I may add here that the Jews had the right idea in celebrating their Passover on the 14th of the month Nisan. In other words, when the moon was full, no matter how much of the Jews themselves at that late day may have misunderstood the real meaning and significance of this spring festival. The esoteric fact connected with this spring festival is one which is fully explained in our own theosophical esoteric teachings. The moon among all the ancient peoples, and even today among non-Christian peoples practically all over the earth, has been called the Lord and giver of life, as well as of death. There are certain phases of the moon, in other words, certain positions that the moon occupies, taken in connection with the astronomical positions of the sun and the earth, when influences and forces from both the moon to earth and from earth to moon run strong. Indeed, an examination of the ancient literatures of the world will reveal all this, although in some cases the truth is rather carefully hid, but a study of theosophy will give the key to the enigma. The old initiations have not died off from the face of the earth. They take place even today, and in the archaic way, under the supervision and guidance of men, great sages and seers, who know perfectly well what they are doing, and who know what the inner, and to us, to the average man, mysterious secrets of the universe are. They know how nature's forces and currents run, and in what direction they run, and along what pathways they return. They know, in other words, the circulations of the universe, circulations not only physical, but psychical and spiritual. For verily, there are such circulations in the universe. Everything in the universe is connected and bound together with every other thing that exists. Nature is one universal organism or organic entity. There is a harmony which prevails everywhere, and consequently, there is a cosmic life, which is the ocean of being in which all differentiations take place, which is the great fountain of being in which all things exist. Consequently, nature is one, and as the old Hermetists said, what you see operative in any part of nature merely mirrors what takes place everywhere, because nature's laws form one unity and consequently work together everywhere throughout the mighty mass. Out of the small, discover the great. In the great, seek the mystery of the small. As above, so it is below. As below, as the great Egyptian Hermes said, so is it above. Nature is organically one life, one essence, one consciousness, and one vast, incomprehensibly differentiated aggregate of bodies. And therefore all things in the mighty whole are ruled and controlled alike and show it forth in the manifestations of their individual existences. Thus, therefore, following this analogical principle, just as a man's body has its circulations, has its feeble consciousness reflected from the inner spiritual man, so has the mighty organic sphere of our own home universe. Man is a child of that universe and a reflection of it, manifesting in the small what exists in his great parent. The northern European peoples had a habit of celebrating the Easter festival of spring by sending eggs, colored or otherwise, as gifts to each other. It was a pagan custom among them long before the Christians adopted it. Why we may well ask, out of the apparently inanimate and senseless egg comes a living being. Omni vivium ex ovo. Every living thing springs from an egg, be it small or be it great. The egg, therefore, was a symbol of the resurrection of life. This mystic, symbolic idea centering around the germ of life enclosed within a relatively senseless encasement or body, which is the egg. But that germ within the egg is a living and working entity, growing wonderfully, mysteriously, marvelously, in time assuming the form and the content of the individual to be born from the egg. And one day the egg bursts and the entity comes forth, the fledgling, the chick, the human being, for the human life germ is a cell, which is an egg also. Sending an egg was therefore a symbolic message, and was meant to say, brother, with this gift of the symbolic egg, symbol of the new life to be, I hope that you too will soon break the unfolding egg of the lower self, the personal man, and that, having broken the shell of your personal being, you may step forth as the master within. It therefore meant seek initiation, break the shell of the lower personal man, and step out as the living germ to be developed into an entity fit to live in the larger world of the spiritual. The egg, therefore, mystically and symbolically, represented the birth of the living Christ, his resurrection from out the tomb of the material encasement. The personal man must be crucified, i.e., slain, metaphorically speaking, in order that the Christ within may resurrect or arise. Why not ally yourself with your own inner divinity, the real spiritual and intellectual essence of yourself? There is the source of all wisdom and of all knowledge. In becoming at one with this inner source, you attain the great peace. To reach the great quiet and mighty strength, you touch the vast reservoir where are stored up all the greatest forces of the universe. The very heart of each one is in actual fact the heart of the universe, a heart which is not localized but is everywhere, called the heart of the universe because it is the central focus of consciousness of every entity that exists. The pathway of beauty, the pathway of peace and strength, the pathway of the great quiet is within. This is the pathway that the great sages and seers of all ages have taught. Follow that pathway. It will lead you to the heart of the sun, the master and guide of our solar system. And later, if you follow it, it will conduct you to a destiny still more sublime. Yet that sublime destiny is only the beginning of something grander. For evolution, growth, expansion of consciousness go on forever. And when the Theosophist becomes the occultist, when theory is exchanged for practice, then the path of occultism is discovered to be this path which goeth onwards forever. And I think that's the end of the book.
Yes, sir.
So break free from that shell, become your true self. All right, until next time.
All right, buddy.